Okay, thanks, Catherine. The first time I talked to you some weeks ago, and you told me about this project, I thought this woman is amazing, seriously. And you inspired me thinking about there's some things that no robot can automate, like your empathy and the connection I feel talking to a great woman, great professional, and big mother, I'm sure. And thank you very much. And now, the star, I'm going to introduce you, because it's a pleasure to me, to Jacques Guerette. He's the Executive Director of the Foundation for Studying Science and Technology, which is the subject of today's talk. Jacques is a veteran senior executive of the high-tech community. He has an extensive background related to all parts of the high-tech ecosystem, including marketing and communications, product design and development, business development and management, venture capital, and a whole lot more. His area of work are equally broad, encompassing telecommunications, computer security, satellite remote sensing, cardiovascular disease, genomics research, and more. He has served on numerous boards, committees, and advisor groups, including the Path to Integrity project as an international advisor, and the Human Research Ethics Board of the University of Ottawa Health Institute. The airline lost his suitcase, and he said that he's going to dance, but I'm sure that we are going to learn a lot with him. Thank you very much.
3? Okay. So thanks for hanging in there. It's been a very long day. The subjects and topics and tips and tricks have been very, very interesting. I'll try to at least meet that. There's the world that we live in, and then there's the world that we aspire to. In the world that we aspire to, I had for you a very sexy PowerPoint presentation. It had bold colors and was full of insight and practical advice. It was thought-provoking. In the world we live in, the airline lost my baggage, so I have to do it with this. And as was promised, if I get really boring, I'll end up dancing or something to try to keep you awake. I'm the executive director of a group called the Foundation for Student Science and Technology in Canada, and we exist to try to deal with a problem that Canada is facing, and it's a problem that, it's in all likelihood, anyone in this room, their country is facing or is going to face. And it's a problem of an aging population. So in Canada right now, just to give you a sense, we are the second largest country in the world, and we have one of the smallest populations for a country. So 5 Madrids equals the population of Canada. 2.5 Madrids equals about 60% of our population. Everybody knows the importance and influence of science and technology in society in terms of, maintaining values, economic prosperity, and so forth. And we know that this is a global phenomenon not unique to Canada. So the issue is getting as much of our STEM potential developed as possible, and that is why we exist. So we work with high school, college, and undergraduate students who are basically the top 5 to 10% of students in our country, and we help prepare them for careers in STEM. As a total aside, I'm going to use the acronym STEM, which is Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. And for many reasons, that acronym is changing. You've heard STEAM today. The A is arts. And a newer version is emerging called STEAMed, which is entrepreneurship and design. So I really want, when I say science and technology, I really want you to know that I'm speaking in the broadest terms possible. With my background in high tech, we have always had the problem of attracting enough talent. No worries about male or female, we've just had problems attracting enough talent. And particularly in terms of leadership. So it's one thing to be able to code, it's quite another thing to be able to lead a technical project, whether that's a coding project or a research project or so forth. And in high tech, we had a very harsh expression for this. And it went like this. And the expression was, the C students hire the B students to manage the A students. How does a C student get through school? And it's down to all of the soft skills that are so important in the workplace, negotiating, collaborating, teamwork. So we exist to try to make our A students much more like C students. And it appears to be working very, very well. So I'm going to tell you about the things that we do, and then in the course of doing these things, we ended up with a very unexpected result. And I will, of course, tell you that result when we get to it. So our programs basically try to exactly mirror the world of STEM work. So if one of our kids is going to go into this field, and they are, there's absolutely no question about that, if they're going to go into leadership roles, and many of them will, this is the cohort that will be the next, deans of universities, vice presidents of research, principal investigators. These are the people who are going to lead. So we have a number of programs in place to help them see what the real requirements are really like in the world of work. So the first one is we run a cooperative program in the province of Ontario. This is our largest province by far in Canada. We operate in about 175 high schools in that province, and the point of the program is to show high school students how to undertake inquiry-based research. So to qualify for this, the student must propose an original piece of research. And in order for the program to happen, we match that student with a scientist or somebody of that sort who is an expert in that field. And they work together one-on-one for a period of 4 to 6 months, and at the end there's a deliverable of some sort, and it might be as straightforward as a bibliography of research. It might be something much more complicated than that. It's interesting because the mentors are not, this is not done face-to-face. This is all done online. The mentors may not be in Canada. We've had mentors from as far away as Brazil, as an example. And they learn how to undertake the research project and conclude it, but in that 4 to 6 month period, they also have lots of one-on-one time with somebody who is working in the field of their choice. So they get to find out all kinds of interesting things about the world of work. They get all kinds of insights. And on the mentor side, they quite enjoy it because I'm sure you all have programs where a scientist will go into a high school environment to deliver a talk. And oftentimes this is not particularly popular with the scientists because they go into the classroom and half the students are asleep and half aren't paying attention and so forth. So in this example, they are dealing with somebody who knows the subject inside out, is very passionate about it, and is asking thoughtful and insightful questions. Our next program is we publish a journal of original student research. And this completely emulates the publishing process that exists in science and technology today. So it's an open source journal, it's peer reviewed, only about 25% of the papers that are submitted are accepted. There is one big difference. You've heard people speak about the publish or perish mentality that exists in research. Part of that publish or perish, when you submit a paper, the review process can be pretty brutal. They pull no punches, it's often hostile. This is where we differ. We're trying to be encouraging and supportive, so we like to offer students positive comments, and in some cases we'll publish the comments along with the piece of research as a learning tool for readers and teachers who read the journal and so forth. So we are getting papers from around the world. About 25% of the papers that we get are from outside of Canada. India, Israel, China, Korea, the US, and on and on and on. And we're getting this without promoting ourselves in any way, shape, or form. That is not the unexpected result, but it's a very beneficial result. I currently have a backlog of about 200 papers awaiting publication. We cannot produce our journal fast enough to get this very important body of research out to the community. And it is an important body because the person who is successful in publishing gets a professional citation that they can add to their resume, which as an emerging researcher or scientist is exceptionally important for reasons you've heard today. Sometimes the paper is cited in professional publications, which is a further coup. And most importantly is when they get to the working world, they in effect hit the ground running because they already know how to write and get research published. So it's extremely, extremely valuable. The next program is, well, actually, before I move on, let me give you a bit of color about our cohort and about the research. So this is just three random ones to give you a flavor. We are based entirely on ability. That is the qualifier. It's not age, it's not gender, it's not economic background, nothing else, entirely on ability. So I have an 8-year-old kid who did a meta-analysis. That is a study of studies. So this 8-year-old boy read 30 physics papers and produced a physics paper based on what he had read. I have another student in grade 11, so that would be about 16 years old, optimized the transit system of a small town in Canada and saved them $275,000 a year. That's about 300,000 euro or something like that. My favorite one was we had a student who wanted to do some research on cryptography. Cryptography is most often associated with espionage, so we contacted our national spy agency to see if we could find a mentor, and the spy agency said, give us a week. So they called us back a week later, and they said, there's nobody in Canada doing any research of this type. But here's the name of the fellow at MI5 in the UK. Give him a call. By the way, he's waiting for your phone call. And by the way, let us know how the kid does. So you can see that having this practical experience, opens doors very, very early on. We also run a program where we have developed software modeling and simulation for high school and undergraduate students. And the idea here is to learn sort of the principles and practices of software modeling and simulation. In science and tech, I'm hard-pressed to think of anything that you can do that doesn't involve modeling and simulation at some point. So we've had upwards of 300 students complete research projects using our software. It's called Cobweb. And we've had about another 2,000 students use it to learn the principles and practices in a general sense without doing a specific research project. And some of these projects, one used it to study what are called suicide genes, which trigger in the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. So this is a high school student exploring, a very specific set of genes related to a very specific disease using software modeling and simulation. So the advantage that this afforded that student is numerous. She ended up winning a National Science Award and this kind of stuff. The last program is probably a little easier to understand. We call it the Ambassador Program, and it is entirely aimed at helping a student build a network of peer support. And that peer support would include like-minded individuals who are also students, but it would also involve people in organizations and agencies and companies across the country, and anyone else that might be of relevance. So we have a whole host of activities, and these don't have to be big things. So for instance, we have a program where a student will be connected with a professional scientist, and we buy them coffee. And they spend an hour or two in a coffee shop, and the student asks whatever they want of the scientist. And having the ability to do those kinds of connections at such a young age is proving to be extremely motivating for our young people. We have other instances where we will run a one-day conference, and we, as the foundation, provide guidelines and framework, but the organization of the event is entirely up to the student, the student team that is there. And the point is, obviously, to have a good, informative conference, but it's all of the soft skills, again, that these kids are learning that are ultimately valuable. So they're learning how to negotiate with suppliers. They're learning how to advance their idea in a group setting so they can be heard. They're learning how to write proposals and seek sponsors and this kind of stuff. Now, even though these are really bright kids, we have to remember they're still kids. And so their data set, if you want to call it that, is quite incomplete sometimes. So for instance, we were organizing one of these one-day conferences in Ottawa, and I approached the team and I said, how many people are coming to this event? And the very proud answer was, we have 275 likes on Facebook. Okay. How many people are coming to the event? We have 275 likes on Facebook. So they're still learning to connect the dots in some way, and I think we have to remember that when we talk to our young people. And then you have generational characteristics, and I will assume that Canadian millennials are perhaps similar to European millennials or elsewhere. They're having a problem dealing with adversity and with challenges is what we're seeing. So again, in this conference, we ran into a pretty minor logistical problem, and the solution was the whole team quit. And I had to have a sit down and say, in the real world, you kind of can't do that. So they ultimately all came back, but that was the gut reaction. So I often play the role of, Canadian joke, the abominable no man, just to put adversity in front of these kids, because for many, especially the very bright kids, this may be the very first time they run into a challenge or a problem that is, to them, somewhat insurmountable. So that's kind of what we do at a glance. The cohort is about quality, not quantity. So I won't stand up here and tell you about the tens of thousands of kids that had an enriching science experience or that sort of thing. We are targeting the future leaders, knowing that they're going to shape the world of science and technology, and by extension, our Canadian culture and ecosystem going forward. Now, there's a lot of changes going on in science and tech as well, and you've heard some of them today. And one of the key ones is that it's actually getting pretty rare for any sort of science or research to be conducted by an individual. More often than not now, it's groups. So you hear a lot of words around science and tech these days, interdisciplinary, collaboration, and so forth, which means to conduct research, it's increasingly important that you learn to work together in groups. And particularly in terms of advancing your idea and simply being heard. It's important to communicate ideas clearly in view of your future life of writing research grants and proposals. And if you're a good one like Julia, you'll get a big, massively funded Path to Integrity project. Not everyone can enjoy that. So what is the unexpected result of all of this? So again, we are based entirely on ability. That is our sole criteria. And here's what's happened. If you look at our co-op program, 55% of the graduates are women, 35% are men, and the remaining percentage are gender neutral. If you look at our ambassador program, 65% of the leadership is women, 80% of the team is women. If you look at our journal, our science editor, who is a doctor, is a woman. Our 2 student editors-in-chiefs are women. Most of our peer review PhD group is women, and so on. So in line with that, at least in Canada, more women than men are entering university these days. I honestly don't know if that's a trend over here, but it certainly is in Canada. So we actually may be getting quite close to a bit of a golden era for some of the things that we've been talking about today in terms of the changes that are being made. The kind of change we're talking about is not revolutionary, it's evolutionary. In our case, we simply do not have enough people to continue to do things the way they've been done. We are being forced to cast our nets wider. If I'm a chemistry student and I leave chemistry and go to biology, shame on chemistry for losing me. If I leave STEM, then shame on all of us. We can't afford to do that. So we have a few programs that are under development, and I'm sensitive to time. So the one I want to tell you about is in an effort to help build peer groups, we are launching a new publication specifically devoted to women in science. And we have a code name for it right now. It's called Project W. And it'll do some of the things that are obviously apparent. So we will do interviews with accomplished female scientists. So for instance, we have an interview with a Canadian researcher who has discovered the oldest water on the planet. And it's water that's over 1 billion years old. That's actually not the main part of the publication. The main part of the publication is to get young people to talk to young people about their experiences. So we want someone who might be just a year or two ahead of the reader to talk about what they're seeing and experiencing as they enter the world of work. So as an example, we have a young woman who is studying to be a doctor, and she's writing about her experiences at being an intern. And she's noting some very interesting things. She goes into hospitals, and they have changing rooms. So one changing room is called the doctor's changing room, and that's for men. The women doctors change in the nurses' changing room. And so, you know, we are getting reports with a fresh set of eyes that for me are, you know, certainly eye-opening. And we feel that is perhaps the most important conversation you can have is, you know, not to have too big an age spread. So I'll stop it there. I would have walked you through my wonderful presentation. If you want to email me, if you're interested, I will send you a copy of the presentation. We have examples of the journal on our website. And STEM is not a Canadian phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. So without even trying, many of our programs have international dimensions and I think are relevant. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you have a question? Yeah.
It's a very small, quick question. You mentioned that 25% of the papers which are sent by students come from abroad.
Yep.
And you mentioned a few countries, and there it was Israel, Brazil, India,
Yep.
but there was no European country. Do you also get, if you...
We do.
Also from European countries, members?
We do.
Union member states?
There's a randomness to this that I haven't been able to quite figure out just yet. So for instance, there was a high school in New Jersey that found out about us. And for a period of about 6 weeks, we ended up receiving 14 submissions from that university. Lately, it's been a lot of Korea and Japan. I can't, we're not very big, so I can't sometimes do the analysis that I want to do. We do get European papers, but it's in batches, and I'm not entirely sure why.
Thanks.
One more question for you.
I'm very surprised because you get a lot of women, and yet we don't see them come into the STEM jobs, or the percentage of engineers in Canada has not grown up. The scientists neither. So how do you explain this leaky pipeline?
So I explain the leaky pipeline because we are by no means yet where we want to be. number one. I think we're at the very early stages of plugging the leaks, if I can put it that way. And we are learning as we go. So for instance, I recall a story in the Washington Post about 9 months ago, which was reporting on I think it was a National Science Foundation piece of research, and it was why women leave STEM. And the big conclusion, if I recall it properly, was that many women are leaving STEM in order to work with larger groups of women. And if that's true, then boy, do we have a circular problem in STEM. How do we fix that? I'm not really sure. But, as we go through this exercise, we're learning. One of the things we want to do, and we haven't started, is to track our cohort through their entire career life cycle, right? And so my motivation for that was the Irish Science Fair. The fellow who won the first version of the Irish Science Fair recently retired as the president of an American biotech company. So think of all the twists and turns that he would have gone through, and we have the cohort that would be research-oriented, that would be data-oriented, that would contribute over their careers to say, why did they turn left here instead of right, and what is that going to tell us? We haven't launched it yet. That's on the drawing board. That is certainly something we want to do.
More questions? Okay.